Life in Italy. Beautiful women. $700 budget and hidden. Truth tourists never see. Did you know that most tourists visiting Italy spend nearly $200 a day and still miss out on the country Italy's real soul? I didn't believe it either, until I spent just $700 for an entire week here and ended up having a richer, deeper, and more surprising experience than I ever expected. This isn't a fairy tale, and it's definitely not another top 10 tourist attractions in Rome type of story. What I'm about to share is the Italy that locals know, that guidebooks won't tell you, and that influencers won't show you. And yes, it involves good food, beautiful people, and a few emotional curveballs I didn't see coming. Let me just say this up front. Italy is not what you think. It's not just old ruins, expensive wine, and Instagrammable gondola rides. There's another Italy hiding in plain sight. One that smells like fresh espresso and wet cobblestones. One where grandma scolds you for not wearing a scarf and then hands you fresh-baked bread. One where strangers invite you to weddings, not because you're special, but because that's just how life works here. The kind of Italy you can't buy, only feel. And somehow, I found all of it. On a budget that shouldn't have lasted 3 days. I didn't come here with a film crew or a luxury itinerary. I came with a backpack, some saved-up freelance money, and a personal challenge. Can I live in Italy for a week on just $700 without missing out on what makes it truly magical? Spoiler. I didn't just survive. I laughed, cried, connected, and even questioned some things about my own life along the way. And it all started with a tiny mistake at the airport that turned into the best decision I made. When I landed in Milan, I made the classic tourist error. I followed the signs to the big train station thinking I'd head straight to Florence. But I missed the express train by minutes. And instead of waiting 2 hours for the next one, I took a local train going in a completely different direction. It dropped me off in a small town I couldn't pronounce. No museums, no crowds, just cobbled streets, a fountain in the middle, and old men playing cards. I was annoyed at first, until I met Marco, the cafe owner, who charged me $1 for an espresso, and then spent an hour talking to me about life, love, and why no one under 30 in town wants to stay. That moment set the tone for everything that followed. Here's what this documentary will show you. How to live better by spending less. How beauty in Italy isn't just about faces, but about how people live and how the real magic of this place hides in everyday moments, not in glossy travel posters. I'll show you what it is like to sip wine next to locals who don't speak your language but somehow speak to your soul. I'll share how I managed to stretch a tiny budget across 5 cities, why some of the most beautiful people I met didn't wear designer clothes, and how I ended up in places where even Italians rarely go. Most people think Italy is expensive, and yes, it can be. But most people also follow the same tired route: Rome, Venice, Florence, and get stuck in a cycle of overpriced pasta and crowded cathedrals. What they miss is the soft rhythm of the countryside, the honesty of small-town cafes, the stories hidden in graffiti, and the late-night songs echoing from an open window. That's the Italy I met. Now, I'm not saying I unlocked some grand mystery. I didn't. But I did slow down enough to notice things, like how a $2 slice of focaccia eaten on a church step can taste better than a $200 meal. Or how the most genuine smile you'll see might come from a 70-year-old lady selling olives, not a hotel concierge. This country, as beautiful as it looks on postcards, has another face. Tired but kind, worn but wise. And that's the face I got to know. You might be wondering, is this really possible? Can someone actually enjoy Italy without breaking the bank or sticking to tourist checklists? The answer is yes, but only if you're willing to trade luxury for connection, speed for slowness, and comfort for surprise. If you are, this video might just change how you travel, or maybe even how you live. So, before you scroll away thinking this is just another budget travel hack meets you story or a cheap attempt to go viral, give it a few minutes. I promise you'll see something different, A little fun, a little truth, and a whole lot of heart. Because this isn't the Italy in your guidebook. This is the Italy tourists never see. And once you do, you'll never want to see it any other way. How I lived an entire week in Italy for $700. When I told people I was going to Italy with only $700 to spend for a whole week, most of them laughed. Some looked confused. A few warned me I'd be sleeping on benches and living off bread and water. And honestly, I was scared they might be right. But now, after living that week, I can confidently say, it's not only possible to live in Italy on $700, it can actually be a better experience than spending thousands. The trick is knowing what to skip and what to lean into. First, let's talk about accommodation. This is usually where your money disappears the fastest, especially in cities like Rome or Venice, where hotels can easily cost over $150 a night. That's half the budget gone in just one day. But I avoided that trap by thinking a little differently. I used couch surfing for 2 nights in Florence, and I stayed in a small family-run hostel near Bologna, where I shared a room with 3 other travelers. Each of us paid just $18 for the night, and it came with breakfast. Yes, there were some snoring issues, and one guy wouldn't stop talking about conspiracy theories, but it was warm, safe, and full of real conversation. In one small town, I stayed in an agriturismo, a kind of local guest house that farmers run. It cost $25, but I got a full dinner and even some homemade wine. Best part? The owner gave me a ride to the bus station the next morning, saving me another $5. These kinds of stays won't be listed on the big travel apps. You find them by asking around or just taking a walk down a street without tourists. Next challenge, transport. The high-speed trains in Italy are sleek and fast, but they're also expensive. A single trip from Milan to Rome can cost $60 or more. But here, as something many people don to know, Italy has regional trains that cost a fraction of the price. They're slower, sure, and they don't look as shiny, but they get you where you need to go. For short distances, I walked. A lot. On average, I walked about 20,000 steps a day. That's not just free. It's how I found most of the best food, hidden alleys, and odd little shops. In cities, I used public buses and trams, which cost about $150 per ride. I made a rule. No taxis unless I was carrying something really heavy. That rule saved me more than money. It forced me to stay close to the street-level life. And now, the food. Everyone dreams of Italian meals, pasta, pizza, gelato. But in reality, restaurants in tourist areas can charge way too much. I saw spaghetti for $16 in a place where the waiter didn't even look up from his phone. No thanks. Supermarkets were a lifesaver. I bought fruit, yogurt, and coffee snacks for breakfast. I carried a refillable water bottle to avoid spending $2 every time I was thirsty. One small tip: look for local markets early in the morning. That's when the best stuff is fresh and cheap, and the sellers are still friendly. But don't get me wrong, I made some silly money mistakes too. On the second day, I bought a museum ticket for $20 and rushed through it in 30 minutes. I realized later that the real stories were in the streets, not the statues. I also paid $5 for a tourist menu that came with watery soup and a waiter who looked like he hated his job. Lesson learned: if the menu has pictures of food, it's probably not worth it. Let's talk comparisons for a moment. In the US, a budget lunch at a basic fast food place can easily cost $10 to $12. In Italy, for that price, you can have a glass of wine, fresh pasta, and dessert in a small-town trattoria. A night in a US motel? Around $80. In Italy, a bed in a clean hostel can be $20 with breakfast. The trick is avoiding the tourist magnet cities, or at least staying just outside them. The further you go from the hot spots, the warmer the people and the cheaper the prices. By the end of the week, I looked at my notes and receipts. I had spent just under $650, which is around $700, and I didn't miss out on anything. I ate well, I met people, I saw cities, and I even bought a 3 souvenir for my mom. It's not about being cheap. It's about spending with care. I didn't feel poor, I felt intentional. And the best part? I came home with stories, not credit card debt. So, yes, Italy on $700 isn't just a clickbait idea. It's absolutely doable. All it takes is a willingness to go off the beaten path, say yes to a few strange experiences, and accept that sometimes the best moments don't cost a thing. Now you tell me, which one sounds richer? A trip filled with rushed schedules and fancy dinners, or a trip filled with real smiles, shared meals, and long walks under the Italian sun? Because I know which one I'll remember forever. What no one tells you about Italian beauty. Let us talk about something people often bring up when they hear the word. Italy. Beautiful women. Yes, it's true. You will see people who look like they just walked out of a fashion magazine. But that's only the surface. What really surprised me was that beauty here is not just about appearance. It's something deeper, something built into the way Italians live, speak, carry themselves, and treat others. And it's not limited to women either. It's something that flows through the entire culture. In Italy, beauty is a way of life. You'll rarely see someone outside looking careless or messy, not because they're trying to impress, but because they value presentation. It's not vanity, it's pride. It's saying, I respect myself and the people around me. I remember one morning in Bologna. I was staying in a modest guest house and walked to the nearby bakery. The woman behind the counter, Marta, wasn't wearing expensive clothes. She had on a simple blue apron and her hair tied back. But there was something about her. The way she smiled, the way she called everyone amore, and the way she arranged the bread on the shelf, neatly, like it was art. We ended up talking for 15 minutes. She told me her grandmother taught her that being beautiful wasn't about being perfect, but about being kind and confident. Another time in Florence, I met a painter named Giulia. She had paint on her jeans, wild curls, and didn't care one bit about fancy fashion. Yet there was something about her that made people stop and listen. And then there was Angela, a retired librarian I met in a small town near Verona. She must have been around 65, wearing a long black dress and bright red lipstick. She spoke softly, but had a sharp wit. We sat on a bench near the river, and she told me stories about her youth, her late husband, and how she still wakes up early just to water her plants and drink coffee in the sun. She said beauty is staying curious, even when life gets hard. I found myself smiling the whole time, not because of what she looked like, but because of what she gave off: warmth, wisdom, and peace. This made me realize something. Italy might be known as the fashion capital, but in many ways it's more of an emotional capital. People here aren't afraid to feel things. They express themselves openly, whether it's through clothing, cooking, or conversation. You'll see someone arguing passionately one moment and hugging a friend the next. That mix of intensity and warmth is powerful. And yes, it's beautiful. In other parts of the world, beauty is often sold to us in ads, filtered through apps and measured in numbers, likes, followers, and trends. But in Italy, beauty feels natural. It's in the way a mother walks her child to school. It's in the way a waiter remembers your name after one visit. It's in the way people care about small things, like setting a table properly or offering you a seat even when the cafe is full. Of course, there are stylish people here too, especially in cities like Milan or Rome. But even then, their confidence doesn't come from just the clothes. It comes from culture, from being raised in a place where food, art, family, and emotion are all valued equally. I met a young woman in Milan who wore high heels to the grocery store. I asked her jokingly if that wasn't uncomfortable. She laughed and said, "Beauty is not for comfort. It's for joy." It was a light answer, but it said so much. And here's the real truth. The most beautiful moments I experienced in Italy had nothing to do with looks. They came from feeling seen, heard, and welcomed. A warm ciao from a stranger. An older man giving up his seat on the train. A group of teenagers helping a lost tourist without being asked. These small acts of connection are what make people magnetic here. So, yes, the women and the people are beautiful. But it's not the kind of beauty you'll find in magazines. It's not about makeup or money. It's about presence, about showing up fully, about letting your feelings show. Whether it's laughing too loudly at dinner, crying during a family story, or dressing up just because it's Sunday. If you ever visit Italy, don't just look at faces. Watch how people move, how they treat each other, how they share time. That's where the real charm is. And once you see it, you'll stop chasing surface-level beauty. You'll want the kind that lives in gestures, smiles, and stories. The kind that stays with you even after you've gone home. That's what no one tells you about Italian beauty. Beyond Rome and Venice, the Italy locals actually love. When most people think of Italy, the same few cities come to mind. Rome, Venice, Florence, maybe Milan. And don't get me wrong, they're beautiful, full of art, history, and famous landmarks. But they're also packed with tourists, expensive restaurants, and long lines. It often feels more like a museum than a living place. What many visitors don't realize is that there's another side of Italy. Quiet towns, local markets, and real people living real lives. That's the Italy the locals love, and that's the one I got to know. The truth is, once you step out of the tourist zones, everything changes. Prices drop, people are more relaxed, and the atmosphere feels warmer. I once took a random train out of Florence just to see where it would take me. I ended up in a little town called Arezzo. No crowds, no selfie sticks, just narrow streets and open hearts. A woman saw me looking lost and walked with me for 5 minutes to show me a small park that wasn't even on Google Maps. She didn't speak English, and I barely spoke Italian, but somehow we still shared a conversation through smiles and hand gestures. Another day, I visited a town in southern Italy called Matera. It's made up of stone houses carved into cliffs. Tourists are starting to discover it now, but it's still mostly locals. I had lunch in a small cafe that didn't even have a printed menu. The owner just asked what I felt like eating. I told him I wanted something local and cheap. He brought out a bowl of handmade pasta with tomato sauce and fresh herbs from his garden. It cost $6 and tasted better than anything I had in Rome. One of the best things about small towns is how easy it is to talk to people. In big cities, locals often avoid eye contact with tourists. They're tired. They've seen thousands of visitors come and go, and they don't have the energy to connect. But in smaller places, people are curious. They ask where you're from, why you're here, and what you think about their town. They're proud of their home and happy to share it, especially if you're respectful and interested. But not everything is perfect. In many of these places, I heard people talk about how tourism has changed their lives, for better and worse. In one bar in the region of Puglia, I had a long chat with a bartender named Luca. He told me how Airbnb has made it hard for locals to find places to live. People come here for 1 week and pay more than what I can afford for a whole month, he said. It's good for business, but not for families. I could see the frustration in his eyes. He didn't hate tourists. He just wanted balance. In a small flea market in Umbria, I met an old man selling secondhand books and vinyl records. He told me stories about how the town used to be full of families and kids playing in the streets. Now, he said, it's mostly short-term visitors. They come, they take pictures, and they leave. He shrugged and smiled, but there was sadness in his voice. Still, these places hold magic that you won't find in the famous cities. They feel alive, not polished, not perfect, but real. You see laundry hanging between buildings, kids riding bikes, old men arguing over card games, and women chatting on benches. It's everyday life, but in a country where everyday life looks like a painting. One town that truly stole my heart was Lecce, in the south of Italy. It's known as the Florence of the South because of its stunning Baroque buildings. But the best part? It's much more affordable. I stayed there for $18 a night in a small guest house. Breakfast was free, and the owner even gave me a bike to ride around. I spent less than $20 a day and still felt like I was getting a full Italian experience. Walking through Lecce's quiet streets, I stumbled upon a tiny bookstore run by a couple in their 60s. They didn't speak English, but they offered me espresso and tried to find a book in English just so I wouldn't leave empty-handed. We ended up sitting outside the shop for an hour, sipping coffee and listening to a street musician nearby. That memory cost me nothing, but it's one of my favorites. These hidden places remind you that Italy isn't just for taking photos. It's for living slowly, speaking kindly, and paying attention. When you visit only the top cities, you get a version of Italy built for tourists. When you go beyond, you get the version built by love, tradition, and real stories. If I had just followed the usual path, Rome, Venice, Florence, I would have missed all of this. I would have missed the little towns where people know each other's names, where dinner lasts 3 hours, and where beauty isn't something you look at. It's something you feel. So, if you ever go to Italy, don't be afraid to get lost. Skip a museum. Take the wrong train. Ask a stranger where they like to eat. That's where the real Italy hides, in the corners, the cracks, and the conversations. And trust me, it's worth finding. This isn't what Olive Garden told you before coming to Italy. I thought I knew what Italian food was. Spaghetti, pizza, garlic bread, and some creamy sauce here and there. That's what I grew up eating at restaurants like Olive Garden. But when I actually arrived in Italy, I realized something quickly. What I thought was Italian food wasn't even close. The real food here is simpler, cheaper, and way more full of life. In Italy, food isn't just something you eat, it's something you feel. And the most surprising thing? The best meals I had didn't come from fancy restaurants. They came from small kitchens, street corners, and homes filled with laughter. One of my favorite meals was in Naples. I had just $5 in my pocket and a big appetite. I walked into a little street-side shop where an old man was serving fried snacks out of a paper bag. I got a pizza fritta, a deep-fried folded pizza filled with cheese and tomato sauce. It was crispy on the outside, soft inside, and full of flavor. Cost me $2.50. I ate it standing on the sidewalk, and it was better than any pizza I'd eaten back home. In the same city, I met a local woman named Rosa, who ran a tiny pasta stall with just 2 menu items: spaghetti with tomato sauce and pasta with potatoes. That's it. Each bowl was $3. I chose the tomato one, and wow, it was rich, warm, and made with love. There was no fancy plating or shiny menus, just honest, home-style food. I asked Rosa why she didn't serve more dishes. She smiled and said, "Better to make one thing perfect than 10 things badly." That sentence stayed in my mind. Then came Bologna. People say it's the food capital of Italy, and I believe it. I tried tagliatelle al ragù, which most people know as bolognese. But here, it was different. The pasta was fresh, hand-cut, and the sauce wasn't drowned in tomato. It was slow-cooked meat, herbs, and just enough flavor to make you stop and take a breath. It wasn't heavy, just comforting. I paid $6 for that dish in a tiny eatery behind a bookshop, and it easily beat the $20 pasta I once ate in a tourist restaurant in Rome. But the best food experience I had wasn't in any restaurant. It was in a kitchen. While in a small town in Tuscany, I stayed in a local guest house. One night, the family invited me to cook with them. They didn't speak much English, and I definitely didn't know all the Italian cooking terms, but we made it work. The kitchen was loud, busy, and full of wonderful smells. The grandma, who must have been 80, gave me the job of washing basil. Her hands moved quickly as she prepared fresh pesto using a mortar and pestle, not a blender. The dad rolled out pasta dough while humming. The kids tried to sneak pieces of cheese from the table. It was messy and fun. At one point, I dropped an egg on the floor and everyone laughed. Instead of getting upset, they showed me how to crack it properly. We made simple dishes: fresh pasta with pesto, roasted vegetables, and a salad with olive oil they made from their own trees. When we sat down to eat, it wasn't just a meal, it was a memory. We talked, we laughed, and we sat at the table for almost 2 hours. Not once did anyone check their phone. That night, I learned that food in Italy isn't about speed or style. It's about connection. It's a way to bring people together, to share stories, and to slow down. That something you won, feel in fast food chains or high-end restaurants that serve tiny plates with big prices. Another thing that surprised me was how different food is from one part of Italy to another. In Naples, it's all about bold flavors, strong tomatoes, chewy pizza crusts, and street snacks that fill you up. In the north, like Bologna or Milan, food feels richer, more butter, more meat, more cheese. In Sicily, I tried arancini, fried rice balls stuffed with meat and peas. In Venice, seafood is everywhere. It's like each place speaks its own food language. And here is the best part. Eating like a local is not only more meaningful, it's also cheaper. I had amazing meals for under $5 almost every day. All you have to do is skip the places with big signs in English and photos of every dish. Walk a few streets away from the tourist areas, look for places where the locals are eating, and don't be afraid to try something you can't pronounce. By the end of my trip, my idea of Italian food had completely changed. I no longer wanted creamy Alfredo sauces or huge plates of garlic bread. I wanted small, fresh meals that tasted like they had a story. Meals that reminded me of people, not prices. So, no, this isn't what Olive Garden told me. It's better, simpler, more honest. And once you've tasted the real thing, you'll never want to go back. What Italians? Whisper. When tourists leave Italy is a dream for many people. Tourists come from all over the world to see the art, taste the food, and walk through the history. But behind the beauty, there are things that locals quietly feel and rarely share with visitors. These feelings don't always match the picture-perfect image of Italy. They are more complicated, filled with pride, frustration, and a bit of sadness too. One afternoon, I was sitting in a small village in Sicily, sipping coffee outside a quiet cafe. An elderly woman sat on the bench next to me. She looked kind, wearing a long brown dress and holding a small grocery bag. I smiled and said, "Buongiorno," and she returned the smile. We began talking, slowly, with my basic Italian and her gentle patience. Her name was Maria. As we talked, she told me about her grandchildren. All of them had left, some to Rome, some to London, one even to Canada. She looked down and said, "There is no work here. They love this land, but love doesn't pay bills." That sentence hit me hard. Maria had lived in the same village all her life. She remembered a time when the streets were full of laughter, local shops were busy, and families ate together every Sunday. Now, many of the homes were empty. Some turned into short-term rentals for tourists. "People come here for a few days," she said, "take pictures, eat pasta, and leave. But what about those of us who stay?" I started hearing similar things in other places too. In Florence, a young man working in a leather shop told me that his rent had doubled in the past 5 years. "Everything is for tourists now," he said. "Shops that used to sell real handmade items now sell cheap souvenirs. We can't afford to live in our own city." In Venice, things were even more serious. Many locals have moved out because the city has become too expensive and crowded. Some parts of Venice feel more like a theme park than a real place. Locals told me they avoid the main areas completely. "We go out early in the morning or late at night," one woman said, "because during the day the streets are impossible to walk. We feel like strangers in our own home." These conversations changed how I looked at Italy. I still loved the country, but I began to see both sides. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, the people are warm and the food is amazing. But there's also a quiet struggle happening, a fight to hold on to traditions while trying to survive in a world that keeps changing fast. Tourism brings money, and many people are thankful for it. But when tourism grows too much, it can take away the very things that make a place special. Old bookstores close, family-owned cafes disappear, Festivals that once had deep meaning become performances for travelers who don't even understand them. Some locals feel like they have to smile all the time, even when they're tired or sad, just to keep tourists happy. There's also worry about the future. Climate change is hitting Italy too. In the north, summers are getting hotter. In Venice, rising water levels are a real threat. One fisherman I spoke to in a seaside town said, "The sea gives us life, but it's also getting angry." He was talking about storms that are becoming stronger and floods that damage homes and businesses. And yet, even with all this, there's so much pride. People still speak lovingly about their towns, they still cook with care, they still celebrate life with music, food, and strong espresso. They just wish that visitors could understand the full picture, not just the postcard version. Italians love their country deeply, but loving something doesn't mean ignoring its problems. It means caring enough to speak the truth. And that's what I heard over and over. Honest words shared quietly after the crowds had left. So, what's the difference between tourist Italy and real Italy? Tourist Italy is neat and perfect. Real Italy is messy, emotional, and alive. Tourist Italy gives you what you expect. Real Italy gives you what you didn't know you needed. A story, a connection, a small moment that stays with you long after your trip ends. As a traveler, I felt lucky to hear these stories. They made my trip more meaningful. They reminded me that behind every pretty view, there are people living real lives. People like Maria, who sit on a bench and miss their grandchildren. People who want to be seen not just as part of the background, but as human beings with hopes, worries, and deep love for their home. So, if you ever come to Italy, take the time to listen. Talk to someone who isn't trying to sell you something. Ask questions. Be curious. The stories you hear may not always be sweet, but they'll be real. And that's what makes them beautiful. Why everything in Italy feels like a movie. There's something about Italy that makes even the ordinary feel dramatic, almost like a scene from a film. The way people speak, move, laugh, cry, it all has rhythm, emotion, and color. I didn't fully understand it at first, but the more time I spent walking through its churches, talking to strangers, and watching life unfold in the streets, the more I realized that Italians live their lives with feeling. Everything has meaning, whether it's love, religion, or even small daily routines. One thing that stood out to me right away was how open people are with their emotions. In many places, people try to hide what they're feeling. But in Italy, it's the opposite. Whether it's love or sadness or joy, people express it with their whole heart. It's not seen as strange. It's just how things are. A couple hugging in the middle of a piazza? Normal. A man crying in church? No one stares. A loud argument that ends with laughter and a kiss? Just another Tuesday. Religion here is also not something you only see in books or buildings. It's part of everyday life. I walked into churches not to take photos, but to feel the silence. And each time I saw people, young and old, sitting quietly, lighting candles, or just thinking. Faith in Italy is deep, but not always serious. It's gentle, personal, and mixed with real life. One Sunday morning in a small village, I heard church bells ringing and decided to follow the sound. I ended up walking into a wedding. At first, I stood at the back, unsure if I should be there. But then a man turned around, smiled, and waved me in like I was part of the family. I tried to explain I didn't know anyone, but he just said, "All are welcome today." So I stayed. I watched as the bride walked down the aisle holding her father's hand. The whole room clapped, not quietly but loudly with real joy. There was laughter, happy tears, even a baby crying, and no one seemed to mind. After the ceremony, they invited everyone, including me, to the small party outside. We shared food, clinked glasses, and talked as if we had known each other for years. That wedding wasn't just a celebration of love, it was a perfect example of how Italians live in the moment. But not everything goes as planned. I had one funny experience in Rome that I still laugh about. I had learned a few Italian phrases and tried using them often. One evening, I was trying to ask an old woman if the church was open, but I said it wrong. Instead of asking about the church, I accidentally asked if she was married to God. She looked surprised, then burst out laughing. People nearby joined in, and someone said, "Don't worry, she's very holy, but not taken." They invited me for coffee, and we ended up chatting for an hour. What started as a language mistake turned into a sweet memory. Romance in Italy is everywhere, but not just in the way movies show it. It's in how people greet each other with kisses on the cheek. It's in how couples hold hands, no matter their age. It's in the way people look at each other, direct, warm, and real. Italians are not shy about love. They talk about it, laugh about it, and live it fully. Love here is not always about big gestures. Sometimes it's as simple as sharing a gelato or sitting on a bench together. I also saw how deeply people care when someone is gone. In one town, I saw pictures of people who had passed away placed on the wall near a church, with flowers and candles beside them. It wasn't sad in a scary way. It felt respectful and peaceful. A woman explained to me that they honor their loved ones by remembering them in daily life, not just on special days. She said, "Grief doesn't end, but we learn to live with it like a shadow that walks with us." There's something beautiful in how Italy balances joy and sorrow, faith and fun, old traditions and modern life. People go to church in the morning and dance in the square at night. They might pray before dinner and joke around during dessert. Nothing feels forced. It's all natural, like breathing. After spending time here, I understood why people say Italy feels like a movie. It's not because everything is perfect. It's because people live with passion. They talk with their hands, smile with their eyes, and carry their emotions close to the surface. Whether it's lighting a candle for someone they miss, whispering a sweet word to someone they love, or laughing until they cry, everything is full of life. Italy taught me that being emotional isn't a weakness. It's a strength. It means you're alive, aware, and connected to the people around you. And in a world where so many of us hide our feelings, Italy shows us what it's like to live openly, even when things aren't perfect. The cities that took me by surprise. When people talk about visiting Italy, they usually mention the same big names: Rome, Venice, Florence. These cities are famous for a reason, but during my trip, it was the lesser-known places that truly surprised me. Some were loud and full of life, others were quiet and peaceful, but each one gave me something special that I didn't expect. Here's a look at the cities that became my personal favorites. Let's start with Naples. I'll be honest, I was a little nervous before arriving. I'd heard stories about how chaotic it is, with busy streets, scooters flying past, and loud voices everywhere. And yes, all of that is true. Naples is noisy, messy, and fast. But it's also full of heart. There's something raw and real about the city. People live close together, talk to each other from balconies, and shout across streets with joy, not anger. The food is amazing. This is the home of pizza, after all. I had some of the best meals of my life in small places with plastic chairs and no menus. What made Naples special for me was the energy. It's not polished, but it's alive. It reminded me that beauty doesn't always come with order. Sometimes it comes with personality. Then there was Bologna, which quickly became one of my favorite cities in Italy. It doesn't get as much attention as other cities, but it should. Bologna is clean, calm, and full of students thanks to one of the oldest universities in the world. There are covered walkways called porticos everywhere, so even if it rains, you can still walk around comfortably. The food here is rich and delicious. This is where I first tried real tagliatelle al ragù. What made Bologna stand out was how affordable and friendly it was. I stayed in a nice hostel for under $20 a night, and the city didn't feel overcrowded. It had just the right balance of activity and peace. Next came Lecce, a city in the southern region of Puglia. Not many tourists go here, and that's exactly why it felt special. Lecce is often called the Florence of the South because of its beautiful old buildings, but the atmosphere is much more relaxed. Life moves slower here. People sit outside their homes, talk for hours, and enjoy the little things. I loved walking through the narrow streets and seeing locals greet each other like family. Everything was cheaper: food, places to stay, and even souvenirs. Lecce showed me a softer side of Italy, one that isn't trying to impress, just welcome. Verona was another surprise. At first, it felt a little too touristy. After all, this is the city of Romeo and Juliet, and you can see that everywhere. People taking selfies at Juliet's balcony, shops selling love-themed items. But after a day or two, I began to see past that. I found quiet corners, local cafes, and peaceful riversides. I talked to a shop owner who had lived in Verona all his life. He said, "Tourists come for the love story, but we stay for the life here." That made sense. Beneath the tourist spots, there's a real working city filled with kind people and everyday stories. But perhaps the biggest winners were the small towns I didn't even plan to visit. One of them was Arezzo, a quiet town in Tuscany. I went there by accident after missing a train. I expected nothing, but I found narrow alleys, friendly shopkeepers, and an old church where a man was playing the violin. It was peaceful in a way that made me stop and breathe deeply. I had lunch in a family-run restaurant where the waiter talked to me like I was his neighbor. I spent less than $10 and felt like I had been fed both food and love. Another small town was Orvieto, built on a hill with amazing views and underground caves. It was the kind of place where people still wave at strangers and kids play in the streets. I spent a quiet evening there, watching the sunset from a garden bench, and felt more connected to Italy than I ever did in the busy tourist cities. These places reminded me that Italy is not just about checking off famous landmarks. It's about the feeling you get while walking down a quiet street. The smell of bread coming from a bakery, and the sound of church bells in the distance. You don't need a guidebook to find these moments. You just need to be open, take a wrong turn, or follow a local's advice. So yes, the big cities are exciting. But if you want to see the real Italy, the one that makes you feel something deep inside, don't be afraid to go off the map. Try the smaller cities. Visit the quiet towns. Say yes to the unexpected. Because often, the places that surprise you the most are the ones you never forget. Slowness is a superpower. One of the biggest things I learned in Italy had nothing to do with food, places, or even people. It was about time. More clearly, it was about how people in Italy treat time differently. Back home, everything is always rushed. Fast work, fast food, fast decisions. But in Italy, life moves slower. And at first, that made me uncomfortable. But later, I realized it was the most powerful lesson of the whole trip. Let me tell you a funny moment that showed me just how different things are. I was in a small town, trying to catch a bus to the next city. I had a tight plan. My bag was packed, my ticket was in hand, and I stood at the stop exactly on time. The bus was already there, but the driver wasn't letting anyone on. I walked up and asked, "Scusi, can I get on?" He looked at me, smiled gently, and said, "Un momento, sto finendo il mio caffè." He was finishing his coffee. I was shocked. The man had a job to do, a schedule to follow, and here he was, calmly sipping coffee like the bus wasn't about to leave. In my world, being a minute late was a big deal. But in his world, enjoying a quiet moment came first. And you know what? We still left on time. He finished his coffee, started the engine, and gave a little wave like nothing unusual had happened. That's when I started to notice this slower pace everywhere. People didn't rush through breakfast. They didn't eat while walking or scrolling their phones. They sat down, even if it was just for 5 minutes, and enjoyed their espresso. They talked to the barista. They took small bites. They looked outside the window. Morning in Italy felt more like a pause than a push. I began to try the same. I stopped waking up with a plan to do 10 things by noon. Instead, I started the day with a walk to the cafe near my guest house. The man who worked there greeted me by name after just 2 visits. He asked how I slept. He remembered I liked my coffee strong. I would sit there, not doing anything, just watching the street come alive, the sound of church bells, people greeting each other, the smell of bread from the bakery nearby. It was like a gentle reminder that life doesn't have to be a race. Back home, I used to feel guilty when I wasn't being productive. In Italy, I learned that rest and joy are also productive. Sitting in the sun, talking with a stranger, or even doing nothing at all, these are not wasted moments. They are part of living. Even lunch felt different. Meals were longer, not rushed. People talked between bites. They didn't check the time or eat in silence. Nobody seemed in a hurry to get back to work. The focus was on the meal, the company, the moment. It felt refreshing. This slow rhythm wasn't laziness. It was wisdom. Italians still get things done, but they don't let speed control their lives. They don't panic if someone takes an extra minute. They don't believe that faster always means better. And maybe they're right. I started to compare this with life back home. There, everything is about getting ahead, being busy, showing progress. We value people who work non-stop, skip breaks, and always seem on the move. But at what cost? Stress, burnout, and missing out on simple joys. In Italy, I saw a different way to live. A way where people still work hard, but also know when to stop. A way where time isn't something to fight against, but something to enjoy. And the best part? People seemed happier. They laughed more. They complained less. They had time for each other. By the end of my trip, I wasn't walking fast anymore. I stopped checking the clock every hour. I stopped needing everything to happen right away. I even missed a train and didn't panic. Instead, I sat on a bench, watched the clouds move, and felt okay with the delay. Slowness taught me to notice things, to really see what's around me. A small smile from a stranger, a child playing with a stick, the way sunlight hits old stone walls. These are moments I would have missed if I had been rushing. Now I understand. Slowness is a superpower. It helps you see, feel, and enjoy life better. It's not about doing less, it's about living more. And that might be the most valuable thing I brought back from Italy. Beautiful, but broken. And that's why it works. Italy is one of the most beautiful countries in the world. From the outside, it looks like a perfect postcard. Historic streets, stylish people, delicious food, and sunsets that make you pause and stare. But when you stay a little longer and talk to the people who live here, you start to see something else. Italy is not just beautiful. It's also complicated. It's a place full of contradictions. And strangely, that's what makes it feel so real. One of the biggest things I noticed was Italy's mixed feelings about modern life. On one side, it holds tight to tradition. You'll find families eating together every Sunday, grandmothers still making pasta by hand, and people going to the same cafe every morning for years. On the other side, there's a constant struggle to keep up with change. Many young people told me they feel stuck. They love their country, but they don't see a future here. Jobs are hard to find, wages are low, and even if you work hard, it's not easy to move forward. I met a young man in Naples who worked in a shoe store. He was smart, friendly, and spoke great English. He told me he had a university degree in business, but couldn't he find work in his field? Everyone wants experience, he said. But how do I get experience if no one gives me a chance? He still lived with his parents and said he was thinking about moving to Germany. It's hard to leave, he said, but even harder to stay. At the same time, I saw people dressed like they were walking a fashion runway. Italians know how to present themselves. Even on normal days, they look sharp. You'd think they all had high-paying jobs, but many of them are just making it work, finding joy in appearance even if life isn't perfect. Style is a form of pride here, a way to keep dignity even when times are tough. Housing is another strange mix. I walked through streets with beautiful old buildings, flowers on balconies, colorful shutters, and stone paths. But behind those doors, things weren't always as perfect. In some areas, rent has gone up so much that local people are moving out. Tourists can pay more for short stays, so landlords prefer to rent to them. Locals are pushed further away from the city centers they grew up in. A woman in Florence told me, "I love my city, but I can't afford to live in it anymore." Then there's the cafe culture. Everywhere I went, cafes were full. People drinking coffee, chatting, relaxing. It looked like everyone had time and money to enjoy life. But I learned that many of the young people sitting there were either unemployed or doing small jobs. They find comfort in community. Even if they can't change their situation, they hold on to small joys. A coffee, a chat, a laugh with friends, that's how they survive the harder parts of life. I also noticed how Italy values the past. History is everywhere. You see old buildings, ancient statues, and streets that haven't changed in centuries. But this love for the past sometimes makes it hard to move into the future. Old rules, slow systems, and complicated paperwork can make life difficult for people trying to start businesses or do something new. A young woman in Rome told me she opened a small art studio but had to wait 6 months for one license. "It's like they want you to give up," she said with a sigh. And yet, even with all these problems, people stay. They stay because of the beauty, the family connections, the food, and the culture. They stay because Italy, with all its flaws, still feels like home. There's a kind of love here that doesn't fade, even when things are hard. People complain, yes, but they also care deeply. They fight for what they love, even if they feel like the system doesn't always love them back. That's what makes Italy special. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be. The cracks in the system, the struggles people face, they don't take away from the beauty. They add to it. Because when you see a place that still smiles, still loves, and still lives fully even with its problems, you see strength. You see heart. In many ways, Italy reminded me that real beauty isn't clean or simple. It's messy. It's full of feeling. It's something you grow to understand, not just something you admire from a distance. The fancy buildings, the fashion, the food, they're all amazing. But the real magic is in the people who keep going, keep laughing, and keep making the best of what they have. So yes, Italy is beautiful, but it's also broken in some ways, and maybe that's exactly why it feels so alive. Because it shows us that you can have struggles and still have style. You can face challenges and still create joy. And that true beauty lives not in perfection, but in passion. What Italy gave me. I didn't expect. As my last day in Italy arrived, I felt something I didn't expect. Sadness that hit me in a quiet, deep way. I'd only been there for a week, but it felt like I had lived a whole season of life. I'd walked through cities big and small, shared food with strangers who became friends, and learned things that I couldn't have picked up from books or videos. It wasn't just a trip. It changed something inside me. Saying goodbye was harder than I thought it would be. I stood at a small bus stop in a quiet town, waiting to head back toward the airport. The same cafe owner who had seen me every morning came out with a coffee in a paper cup. He handed it to me and simply said, "Safe travels." It wasn't dramatic, but it felt meaningful. I took a few sips, looked around, and realized how attached I had become to these small moments. The simple routines, the faces I recognized, the little waves from across the street. That's when I felt the tears. Not loud or heavy, just a few quiet ones. I wasn't crying because I was leaving a tourist destination. I was crying because I had touched something real, and I didn't want to lose it. This trip had changed the way I think about travel. Before coming to Italy, I saw travel as a checklist. Places to visit, foods to try, photos to take. But now, I see travel as something else. It's about slowing down, talking to people, noticing things, and letting yourself be open to whatever comes your way. It's about being present, even when things don't go as planned. Some of my best memories came from missed trains, wrong turns, and unexpected conversations. Italy also made me see my own country differently. At home, I used to rush through everything. I didn't pay attention to small joys, like a slow meal, a walk at sunset, or sitting with someone just to talk. But after Italy, I wanted to bring that spirit back with me. I wanted to remember what it felt like to wake up without stress, to enjoy a simple breakfast, and to care more about connection than speed. And more than anything, I wanted to remember the people. People who didn't have much but still had so much to give. People who welcomed me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. People who lived fully, even when life wasn't easy. On my second-to-last night, I had dinner with a family I had met earlier in the week. We sat outside, passed plates around, and shared stories. As we said goodbye, the father gave me a warm hug and said something I'll never forget. He said, "You saw the Italy we live, not the one we sell." That sentence stayed with me. Most visitors see the polished side, famous buildings, pretty sights, perfect meals. But what I had seen was different. I saw the daily life, the smiles and struggles, the beauty and the mess. And somehow that made it more special. So yes, I left Italy. I packed my bag, boarded the bus, and flew home. But part of me stayed behind. The lessons, the memories, and the feelings. They came with me. And in many ways, they still shape how I see the world. Italy gave me more than good food and pretty views. It gave me a new way to see life. Don't plan your next trip. Question your current life. If you've made it this far, then maybe something inside you is stirring. Maybe a small voice is saying, "I want to feel what this person felt." If that's happening, don't ignore it. Sit with that feeling. Let it grow. Don't rush to book flights or plan routes right away. Instead, ask yourself a much bigger question. Not where should I go next, but what kind of life do I really want to live? Because travel isn't just about leaving your country. Sometimes it's about stepping away from your usual habits. It's not only about exploring places. It's about noticing the way people live, the way time moves, the way happiness can come from something as small as a warm coffee or a stranger's kindness. Maybe you don't need a big trip. Maybe what you really need is a break from speed, from pressure, from always chasing the next goal. Italy showed me that you don't need more to feel more. You just need to slow down, connect with real people, and pay attention to your moments. Whether you do that in Rome or in your hometown is up to you. But if you ever do get the chance, maybe with $700 saved from skipping takeout or cutting back on things that don't really make you happy, what would you do with it? Would you spend it on things, or would you spend it on moments that make you feel alive? I'd love to know. What would you do with $700 in Italy? Would you take the fast train to Venice or wander into a town no one talks about? Would you buy expensive wine or share homemade pasta with locals who treat you like family? There's no right answer. There's only your answer. So don't just watch videos and wish. Don't just scroll and dream. Ask yourself, What's stopping you from living in a way that feels more real, more simple, more full? You don't need a perfect plan. You just need a little courage, a little curiosity, and a reminder that real life can feel better than anything on a screen. It can feel like Italy. And maybe, just maybe, that feeling is waiting for you to say yes.